G'day everyone, Chris here from Primac Sports with the Round 4 Super Rugby preview. Quickly back to Round 3, which is a very impressive round of rugby with 3 close games, certainly highlighting it for me. The Sharks and Stormers was a cracker, as was the Sunwolves near miss against the Cheetahs in Singapore. And on top of that, add in the Rebels and Reds game, which was a cracker as well, not to mention some of the others. It was also a lucrative round for the Primac Sports team and anyone who followed our tips last week. We managed to bag 7 out of 7 winners. And with 6 margin winners put into a multi, managed to turn $30 into almost $600. So certainly a nice one for the bank. On to round 4. First up in round 4, we've got the Hurricanes versus the Force. That one's being played at Central Energy Trust Arena in Palmerston North. Friday, 5:35 Australian Eastern Daylight Time kickoff. The Force have their work cut out for them as they do travel to Palmerston North to take on the Hurricanes on the back of a home loss to the Brumbies. I hold some grave concerns about their genuine attacking ability after their certain lack of tries, with only 4 tries from 3 matches thus far this season being scored by the boys from the West. And they ended the match with another new halves pairing due to the injury to John O'Lance. They'll certainly be looking to Albie Mathewson and Peter Grant to gel quickly and manage to give them some attacking flair that they've certainly lacked in the opening weeks of the competition. I do think they're going to miss Kyle Godwin again. He really is a talismanic player for the Force. It's been strong for them over a couple of years now. The Hurricanes, they broke their duck last week with a win over the Blues, although they did look a little nervy as they only got out of jail with a hard-fought last 5 minutes of game time defensive effort in their own defensive 5 metres, finishing a couple of those minutes 1 man short after the sin binning of Victor Vito. Impressively, they did hold out wave after wave of Auckland attack and walked away with the win. Most impressive for me were the calm heads of TJ Perenara, Bowden Barrett and Victor Vito. Admittedly, he was unlucky to get a yellow card late in the game for repeated infringements against the side. The Hurricanes are struggling as well with scoring this season, though, in saying that they've only picked up 1 more meat pie than the boys from the West and certainly need to make some more of their attacking opportunities. A big plus for the Hurricanes is the return of skipper Dane Coles from injury. He'll lead their tight 5 round and provide another cool head, which they can certainly do with. I'm looking forward to the battle of the loose forwards. The Hurricanes boast names like Artie Savia and Victor Vito, while the Force carrying names like McCallum and Matt Hodgson. Notable absentee for the Hurricanes this week is Nehemiah Milner-Skudder, probably the biggest breaking injury news of the round. He's out for the remainder of the season with a shoulder injury. They do have an able replacement there in Corey Jane to complement the skills of Julian Savia and James Marshall at the back. With the return of Coles, I'll be leaning to the Hurricanes at home. I don't think they'll blow it out as much as many people are expecting, and I'll be taking them 1-12 here. Next up, we've got the second of the Friday night matches with the Waratahs taking on the Highlanders at Allianz Stadium in Sydney. That's a 7:45 Australian Eastern Daylight Time kickoff. 2 strong but underperforming sides thus far in season 2016 clash in this match. The Waratahs, fresh off the bye, recall Wycliffe Palu for his first appearance in the number 8 jersey of 2016. They will be without hooker Tatafu Politano as he recovers from a broken arm that he suffered against the Brumbies. It's hard to make too much of the form lines of the Waratahs at this early stage. They've had an easy win over the Reds, which they probably should have done by more, and then a disappointing loss to a high-flying Brumbies outfit in Canberra. Again, it's really difficult in this game against the Highlanders. Will certainly give us much more of a figure on where they're travelling in these early parts of the season. The Highlanders, on the other hand, look to be turning their season around. They began 2016 with a lacklustre loss to the Blues. They've bounced back now with consecutive wins. Admittedly, one of those only by 1 point and a lucky one against the Hurricanes, but they certainly looked much more impressive last week. Their backline looked like it really kicked into the gear against the Lions, and I expect to see more of the same again from the likes of Lima Sapawanga, Malachi Fekitoa and Aaron Ben Smith. I think the Highlanders will actually get the upset here, which pains me as a Waratahs fan. I think they'll roll the boys from Sydney on their home turf. Look for Fekitoa to put on a show this weekend. I've got a feeling he's going to really crack it. I've got the Highlanders 1-12 in this one. Next up, we've got a bumper South African clash between the Bulls and the Sharks at Loftus Versfeld. Saturday, 4 AM Australian Eastern Daylight Time. 2 South African sides, still the big 3 over there alongside the Stormers for the 2016. Looked like an absolute cracker of a clash. The Bulls look like they've finally found their abilities and found some gel amongst their team as they put the Rebels to the sword. Though there will be some questions over the way they sort of fell away in the second half against the Rebels and let in a few late tries. They certainly won't want to repeat of that against the Sharks, because the Sharks will take full advantage of it, unlike the Rebels, who were by that point too far behind. I'm expecting last match's hat-trick hero Bjorn Basson and South African superstar Jan Serfontein cause a few troubles for the Sharks out wide. but I think the Bulls are going to need a full 15-man display if they're going to trouble the boys from Durban. Sharks have been ultra impressive thus far this season. 3 wins from 3 attempts, not much more they could have done. The way they took down the Stormers in their last match was very impressive, even though it was a close margin. We tipped them early to make a real impact for this season and with some strong recruiting. And they so far look to be paying off with their efforts with stars like Willie LaRue, Joe Peterson being strong throughout their first few games. Certainly like the Sharks again here, is they're yet to show me why I shouldn't. They've got a strong squad and I expect them to roll the Bulls here. I think the Loftus-Versfeld crowd will keep the Bulls in this one, so I'm going to take the Sharks 1-12 for the win. Next up, we've got the Sunwolves and the Rebels as the first Saturday day game. Prince Chichibu Memorial Stadium in Tokyo, 3:15 PM Australian Eastern Daylight kickoff. The Sunwolves came oh so close to claiming their first win in Singapore last week against the Cheetahs, but the Cheetahs did snatch that one away. They seem to be making some big leaps forward in terms of the way they're gelling, which is to be expected after they had a very shortened pre-season and the players are only really getting to know each other and their abilities at the moment. They'll certainly bring the match to the Rebels here as they host their 3rd straight home game and their 2nd in Tokyo. Fly half Tusi Pisi was a strong performer last week. The Samoan standoff fly half was certainly the leader of their backs and steered their forwards around as well. And I'll look for him to dictate terms again to the Rebels. Also keep an eye out for Aussie breakaway Ed Quirk, who's really stepping up his workload, and I think he'll come into his own against the Australian sides, which will suit his gameplay a little bit more. The Rebels, meanwhile, do come into this match off nearly dropping a game to the battling Queensland Reds at home, which would be disappointing to their fans. They were granted a late penalty which saw them snatch victory in a game that they necessarily weren't thought to be the better side for most of their performance. In a big plus for the Rebels, first choice halfback Nick Sturzaker returns this week. Admittedly, he is named on the bench, but expect to see him come into the game and inject himself. Another surprise for them was that James Hanson's been named on the bench. He's been one of their best so far for me. Was a little bit below his best on the weekend, but still one of their strongest performers and has led the way in a lot of their games. I'd love to be exceedingly bold here and tip the boys from Tokyo, but my head does have to rule over my heart, and as such I think the Rebels will escape this one, but may struggle to blow out the Sunwolves, and as such I've gone the Rebels 1-12. Next up, on Saturday we've got the Crusaders versus the Kings at AMI Stadium in Christchurch. This one's a 5:35 Australian Eastern Daylight Time kickoff. Crusaders came into last week's bye with a strong win over the Blues and will be much fresher for the week off. They look to have found a pretty solid replacement for Dan Carter in Richie Mo'unga. He's slipping into the role like it's an old glove. Mo'unga's been a standout for me across the competition in the early rounds and almost led them to a win in their first game against the Chiefs and was certainly the key component to their win against the Blues. Also impressive for the Crusaders against the Blues was forward leader and former World Rugby Player of the Year Kieran Reid, who actually will be rested for this week alongside a number of others as the Crusaders look to plan towards the later stages of their campaign. I'd really like to see a bit more impact from a few more of their backs. Their backline reshuffle this week might provide that opportunity. Hopefully it'll be a perfect opportunity for Mo'unga and Namani Nandola to get a little more support from the likes of Kieran Fonatia and David Havili, who find themselves as a new centre pairing for this week. I really think Havili at outside centre is going to be a better fit than he was at fullback, and it might be interesting to see how he impacts the game. Kings, meanwhile, seem to think they've entered a competition of tag rugby. Either that or they've all signed on for a cult where tackling is against their religion. Their defensive issues need to be shored up ahead of this first overseas trip, or else they could find themselves on the end of an absolute flogging. If they can add some starch to their defence, they might keep some respectability in the scoreline. If not, the floodgates open and anything's possible. Either way, I can't tip anything here but the Crusaders 13+. Next up, Saturday night, we've got the Reds and the Blues as the Reds host them at Suncorp Stadium, Saturday 7:45 Australian Eastern Daylight Time. The Reds looked resurgent against the Rebels in Melbourne last week on the back of sacking of former coach Richard Graham and almost escaped with the chocolates, but late ill discipline saw them fall behind and walk away with a consolation prize of only a losing bonus point. This at least puts them above the hapless Kings, but still it's not much consolation for what it was a solid effort where they were probably the better team on the day. They are unfortunately down a number of players, and certainly senior players at that, with James Slipper and Kane Douglas already out from their forwards. Add to that now Ben Daly's been ruled out for up to 4 months after tearing his pectoral muscle against the Rebels. It will certainly be a real test for some of their young backs and inexperienced guys like your Eto Naboulis, etc. And Carmichael Hunt will really need to step up and take some control from the back of that back line. The Blues season, on the other hand, they've started so prominently, but it's started to crumble away as they return to their true expected form lines. Their first round win against the Highlanders seems a distant memory after consecutive losses to the Crusaders and the Hurricanes. Admittedly, that loss to the Hurricanes was a close one and they probably should have got away with it, but they just couldn't broach that line in the last few minutes as they attacked with wave after wave. Unfortunately, they've been far too heavily reliant on a few key players, which has enabled other teams to shut down their key attacking channels. Some of the lesser known players do certainly need to step up to lighten the loads on players like your Charlie Faumoinas, Jerome Kano, Zahaya West and George Mwala. Certainly like to see some more output from the guys like Rene Ranger as well, who've got the experience behind them, and I'm sure Tana and Margaret will be in the same boat and be preaching this song at training. I think the Reds will finally break their duck this week at home. It might not be pretty, it might not be classy, and it may be fought out in a very physical battle with both sides having a solid forward pack and some very big backs. I'm going to take the Reds 1-12 in this clash to get it done against the Blues. Next up, we've got the Lions and the Cheetahs at Emirates Airlines Park, Sunday 2:05 Australian Eastern Daylight Time. Certainly a bumper clash of the South African Big Cats in the early hours for the Australian fans. The Cheetahs were lucky to get away with a win in Singapore and came so close to being the Sunwolves' first victim, but their resilience showed in escaping with the competition points. The Cheetahs are clearly lacking an X-Factor player or two and have probably been the biggest sufferer from this year's expansion of Super Rugby and the addition of a sixth Super Rugby side from South Africa in the Kings. The talent redistribution that's occurred with the addition of a sixth side has certainly benefited a number of sides like the Sharks, but it's certainly hurt the Cheetahs. The number of their players heading across the Sharks is to replace the players the Sharks lost. The likes of your Willie LaRue's, Kearney Oosthuizens and Joe Petersons, they can't easily be replaced. In saying that, honourable mentions certainly go to their midfield trio of Daniel Moraes, William Small-Smith and Francois Venter so far. Some really strong performances. And if they achieve nothing else this season, they'll certainly confuse and disrupt the commentators. With 3 players carrying the surname Venter in their side and 2 with the surname of Moraes, it's got to be a commentator's nightmare. The Lions have been a bit of a wild card thus far this season, starting with a strong win over the Sunwolves in Japan. They followed that up with a dismantling of the Chiefs in New Zealand, which was a bit of an upset, before travel took its toll in their 3rd straight away game and they came unstuck against the Highlander side that was really starting to find its feet. The return to Johannesburg should reinvigorate the squad, and I expect the loose forwards of Yarko Creel and skipper Warren Whiteley to lead the way. And I think they get the job done and may even do so comfortably at home. I'm going to go out on a limb here and take those Lions by 13+. Alright, next up we've got the Stormers and the Brumbies at DHL Newlands, 4:15 Sunday morning Australian Eastern Daylight Time. For the 3rd week in a row, the late South African match is my match of the round. This should be an absolute cracker. An undefeated Brumbies outfit loaded with Wallabies makes the track to Newlands to take on a strong Stormers outfit. The Stormers have thus far only dropped 1 match, and that was last week against the Sharks in what was a certainly respectable outing. This could be an interesting match of contrast, as the Stormers' strength is what is probably the Brumbies' only slight to apparent weakness. We're certainly referring there to the tight 5. And that's saying something considering the Brumbies boast names like Australian captain Stephen Moore and his Wallabies teammate Scott Seo in the front 5. Look over the Stormers to take the game to set pieces as often as they can. They'll look to utilise both line out and scrum and hope that people like Eben Etzbeth and Du Toit and Co can do their job there. The Brumbies will be happy to play their up-tempo game and challenge the edges of the Cape Town side with their prodigious midfield with Tamua, Liliafano and Kuridrani, alongside their loose forwards featuring Pocock and Fardy. All brought together handily by Argentine scrum half Thomas Cabelli, who's been an absolute revelation for them. You add to this complement the 2 Wallaby wingers in Spate and Tamani, and they've got attacking options all across the park. I think the Stormers will take it at the Brumbies early and may even lead in the early exchanges, but the pace of the Brumbies game will eventually take its toll and see the spaces open up for them to strike. Their strike weapons will look to steal the show late and break the locals' hearts. I'll take the Brumbies 1-12 in this one. The 9th and final match of a bumper round of Super Rugby sees us have the Jaguars hosting the Chiefs. Estadio Jose Amalfitani over in Buenos Aires. Sunday, 8:40am Australian Eastern Daylight Time kickoff. Perfect for those guys getting back up on a Sunday morning and having a little dose of rugby there. The Argentine lads, they host their first match in their Super Rugby history and the first match to reach the Americas for the competition. The Jaguars have been impressive so far in this campaign, and so they should be with a nearly international level side at their disposal. From what we've seen so far, adhering to structure and discipline could be their Achilles heel, and senior players like Nicolas Sanchez and Augustin Creevy certainly need to lead the way in this pursuit. They have the strike power to attack you from almost anywhere on the field with a strong set piece as well as free-flowing open play, adding the laser precision of boot of Nicolas Sanchez, and it's an impressive package. It'll be interesting to see how the local fans turn out and whether this indeed becomes, as many are predicting, the toughest road trip in the Super Rugby and can claim the Chiefs as its first victim. The Chiefs, meanwhile, on the 2nd week of their away tour, as last week they absolutely manhandled the woeful Kings side, and they ran in 7 tries, and Damien McKenzie tallied up a personal tally of 28 points, from fullback. They'll again look to the backs to do the damage here with a reliance on Aaron Cruden and Charlie Nagatai as they look for them to be the orchestrators of what looks to be a tough ask in attempting to roll the Jaguares into their first Buenos Aires match. I'm expecting the revitalised Chiefs to put up a strong showing here, but I think the return of hardline second rower Thomas Lavanini from suspension, as well as the wave of crowd support from the home crowd in Buenos Aires, will get the Jaguares home. I think they'll be a little bit too much for the Chiefs here, and I'll be taking the Argentinian lads 1-12. Thanks again for tuning in for another episode of our Super Rugby preview. Again, comment, give us some feedback as to what you think so far of the shows that we've put out. Thanks again. Good luck for the punt.